Today we have the Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader, the quote-unquote whole fight, a reaction to the fight. And we have audio muted for obvious reasons on this. We're going to see if there's any copyright issues. I have done my best to kind of minimize the screen. I have done my best to accommodate, as this is merely for educational purposes. We will, of course, see Disney and Lucasfilms, how they will handle this copyright, handle this material. But alas, I wanted to do my best because I actually got some positive feedback in regards to the old Krauser fight that we did. Just kind of look at it from someone that practices swordplay, someone that kind of, enjoys this type of thing, if you will, and kind of just take a little bit of time to take a look at it and kind of dissect it a little bit, if you will. And, the progression of the fight, what notes hit, what notes don't, obviously without missing audio, but you'll be able to, you'll be able to hear my voice throughout the entire thing. Without further ado, let's get into another combat critique. So obviously we have the Emperor opening, and this just sets the scene. Star Wars is just giant space opera after all. And this really does set the mood where Palpatine is, I would argue, still in full control at this point in time, where Luke is being pushed into fighting for Palpatine, I would argue. Chat's so small. That's so fucking weird. I don't know why chat's small. Figure I can fix chat really quick, or attempt to fix chat really quick. And this does come down to the culmination of the movie, where you have, this was taken obviously by Vader, and spoilers, I guess, for those that haven't watched episode 6. You should probably go watch that first before watching a fight breakdown on this combat critique, if you will. And this comes down to Luke does not have his weapon. He needs to do something because this is, as Akbar said, this is a trap. It is a trap, and he is forced into this situation. Is he going to be subservient to the Emperor? Is he going to become like his father? All throughout the movie, we even see him struggling with the dark side, where he walks into Jabba's palace in black attire, right, choking out the guards, right, and his outfit really does symbolize his conflict, especially at the end. But we can talk about that in a little bit. Palpatine being Palpatine, I can feel your anger. And this is trying to provoke the attack. I am defenseless. Go ahead and do it. To get Luke to fall to the dark side. Palpatine is in full control right now. And thus, we turn into the climactic finale. Luke, as it turns out, so he does grab. So he grabs it. He grabs his lightsaber. Palpatine offers no resistance. And then he goes into, I would argue, I would say that's a high guard. I'm used to high guards being more in the face and up here, but it is a very high guard. Like, he is able to strike from a multitude of places from this. He can defend if need be. He is a little wide, I would argue, but it is a higher. He goes immediately into a guard. Vader opens, and then they swing forward. It is important to note that Vader is striking towards the Emperor, and Luke is striking away. Luke is viewing this as a diversion. He just needs to keep Palpatine busy enough to let his friends do what they need to. Luke is striking away from the Emperor. Palpatine, obviously pleased, is going to let this fight commence. Who gets to be his apprentice? Whether that's, Luke overcoming Vader, whether that's Vader overcoming Luke, and Vader being like, yes, I always believed in you, my young apprentice, right? That kind of thing. And then we get into, so obviously cuts away to another section of the movie. We notice that Luke is a lot more controlled than he was on Bespin, and we have kind of this back and forth. They're actually playing with the strong part of the blade. I've kind of gone over this a little bit, where you have effectively 3 parts of the blade, and this is a very, very broad generalization, where you have the strong part of your blade, which is going to be the nearest the hilt. And this, if you say look at a sword, right, you can kind of follow along. It's got, you have usually have your cross guard here, depending on the sword. The strong part's about here. You get to about the middle of the blade. That's kind of your sweet spot, right? It's not the strongest part of the blade, but it's not the weakest part of the blade. A little more mobile than the strong part of the blade because you have all this leverage down here. And then you have the weak part of the blade, which is off screen, which is going to be, the tip of the sword, right? You have the most movement, but if someone tries to press against it, right? If someone holds like a rapier out to you, right? SCA, right? Someone holds a rapier out to you, and you put your finger, and you just, you can bat away the tip pretty easily, and now try to do it with the base of the sword, right? Near the hilt. It doesn't quite work the same, right? And this is as a very, very broad generalization. You will have different schools, you'll have different thoughts, different manuscripts, etc., that are going to actually, I think, go into, I think it's up to 7, but I don't quote me on that number specifically. It's interesting to consider, and that does go into fight. If you're so I'm heavy in the wind personally, right? So when I fight, right, I want to take care of their blade and I want to control where they're going, right? So if I'm Luke here and Vader's here, I want to meet them and I want to control where they're going. I like playing with the strong part of my blade. I can't stand using the weak part of my blade, but that's because I want to control the direction the fight goes. I'm very defensive in nature. I also do a lot of German longsword, and what I do, I just naturally want to just walk through people, as it were. Ironic because we study a lot of Gundanian, we study a lot of Spanish, Italian rapier manuals and stuff like. We are getting more longsword people though, so that's kind of good. But generally, you can see Luke is a lot more focused here. He's being very, very close with his guard. Some people like to envision a window, right? So say your body's Vader, right? Your window's about here. You know, you protect your, at that point, protect your center of mass, protect your organs. That's then you start evolving to the concept of an infighter, which you fight inside the window, an outfighter, which you fight outside that window. You know, that's a whole different classification, though. You can see that, especially in tandem with Luke's duel on Bespin, that it is turning into, he is a lot more controlled here. He's in a lot more control of his actions. He has a lot more skill than he did in Bespin, which I would argue is just a wipe by Vader. Vader had control of that entire conflict. He is swinging a little wide here, I will note. So that's a pretty good block. He blocks back. So he goes from here. No, that's about right. Because there's I think, is it Sverchow? I can't remember the actual name of it. But in longsword fighting, you know, you're able to go from, say, this position. You're able to whip it around and go to this position. So while I want to say it's wide, no, this would be valid. This would be valid in order to get from in the spin, right? Because Vader's coming through. Vader himself is very, very defensive. He's very, very close to where he's at. Luke comes in. Vader is going to notice that he's moving. It's a plane. So if this was a sword, it's a plane of steel. He is taking this and he is just shifting it over to the right, right? So you say that he's shifting it over, which already is a hard block. You have this. You have the mid part of his sword being with the mid part of his sword, and then in following up with that, we're able to bounce back and he's able to come on the other side where Vader is starting to lower his guard a little bit, keeping up the attack overhead, and that's when he comes in for the kick. Very, very good combo by Luke, actually. And then, obviously, more dialogue, because the more dialogue Palpatine... It adds to this in movie. And this is actually a very important scene where, you know, he doesn't want to fight. Luke doesn't want to continue with this. And story reasons, if you haven't seen Return of the Jedi, you should definitely go watch it. It's actually probably my favorite Star Wars. I don't know, one's kind of grown on me, too. He does have the high ground. Obi-Wan has taught you well, yes. To which Vader is naturally going to open next with "it is unwise to lower your defenses." And he actually goes with a pretty decent overhand. Luke is able to deflect it pretty easily. He's keeping that center. He is winning the crossing here, actually. Winning the crossing being, you know, if you have a crossing of blades, who has control of that situation? It's on the strong of his blade. This is going towards the weak of Vader's blade. So if Luke were to say, I don't know, just move his hands over, he could very easily expel this, parry this in one direction. In regards to footwork, it's hard to tell because it's all black. No, I mean, I do take a little bit of issue with that. His center of mass is a little off here. If in SCA, that would absolutely be... This is no shade to Mark Hamill or the choreographers. This is a beautifully done fight scene. This is me going through as somebody that partakes in SCA, that partakes in certain activities like this, and kind of taking a little bit of a deeper dive. He is a little off balance, I would argue, but it could also be walking up the stairs and trying to maintain the bind at that, winning that crossing, if you will. Because at any point, Vader could honestly probably Cavazione over the top, I would argue. But he does make his way up the stairs. Stance is a little wide, but he's pretty solid in his foundation. Luke once again winning the crossing. Good wind. And he's just too quick. Vader just can't keep up with those movements anymore, not with the prosthetics that he has. and this does go into the ebb and flow of this fight. Just it ebbs and flows in regard to their dueling ideologies. This is a duel of ideology. I actually had my sister recently. She was talking about, oh, I don't know why you find Star Wars actually like. Why do you find it good? We always hear Dad talk about it's good versus evil. Why do you actually like Star Wars? And it come for me. I actually had to not derail into a 40-minute rant. Because even from the prequels, right? Which the prequels absolutely are supposed to be political. It is the political story of how the Galactic Republic fell and it became the Galactic Empire, right? That's how that was. We had the dissatisfaction with certain members of the Senate. That's why we got the Trade Federation doing what they did in regards to blockading Naboo. And then we get into the formation of the oh, what is the word? I always forget the separatists, whatever they're part of. I can't remember what it's called. Confederacy of something, I can't remember. But then you get the separatists versus the Republic, and how that's just a proxy war, and then we lead into Sheev's eventual hostile takeover of the Senate. Very, very good story. And it goes into like how the Jedi aren't necessarily all good themselves. They became dogmatic. They became complacent after Confederacy of Independent Systems. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And it's a very, very good political story in fiction, where you go into this 4, 5, 6 that is after the fall. This is going to be a story of dueling ideologies, where you have Vader that sees no other option but sees hope in Luke and would want nothing more than Luke to be at his side. Luke, join me, together we can rule the galaxy, whether that's what he necessarily wants or not. And this is coming to fruition, where you have Palpatine, the ringleader, so to speak, the literal galactic emperor, and Vader, and Vader's being forced to duel Luke because he sees no other way. And thus this gets into a story of redemption. It is much more than a story of good versus evil. And we can see that in this fight. There is conflicting ideology. I see the good in you, Father. You underestimate the power of the dark side, then. Is Vader doing his signature saber throw. And in one shot, just completely just throws him down. And he's eating this up. Palpatine's absolutely loving this right now. He is having a time. Vader, very controlled, very menacing steps. Vader is going to be a force that will walk right through you. I actually really do like this scene, because Luke is trying to prolong the fight. He's trying to hide. He's, not trying to draw super much attention to himself. He's trying to really just buy for time. But unfortunately, force powers, etc., Luke's feelings betray him, and thus betrays that Leia exists, into which remember, Vader is a Jedi killer. He has killed countless Jedi. It's kind of his specialty. Like, he is frustratingly good at doing so. And thus he's able to use this against Luke, and thus able to bring out Luke's true feelings and be able to, I don't want this to happen. This will not happen. And Luke is going to be protective over Leia. Vader brings out the dark side in Luke, and then Luke brings out the light side in Vader. Yes, there is the duality of that as well. And this is effectively just gaslighting at this point. It's, if Obi-Wan was wise to hide it from me, now his failure is complete. If you will not turn to the dark side, then maybe she will, which, knowing Leia, she wouldn't. She would have fought to her dying breath. Luke never. He is able to completely take Vader by surprise. He is just, with that is a beautiful thrust. Little high, a beautiful fucking thrust. He immediately wins that crossing and is able to deflect Vader off of the side. He's able to expel him to the right. So Luke wins that crossing and is ready to come in here, which he kind of does. Vader, I argue, tries to fight back there. So, no, he doesn't. It's a matter of positioning, and the light's making it a little hard. So he thrusts forward. He wins the crossing. Vader tries to expel him backwards. Luke brings it out from underneath, hitting the back here. He's swinging really wide. You can tell that he's fueled by emotion at this point. He is not as close as he was. And that's a very, very good transition. That is a very good attention to detail that the filmmakers did pay attention to. I absolutely love this. To which he's going to come back. He's going to reel back. He's swinging really wide. Vader cannot handle this aggression, especially not in a tired state. It's all he can do to keep his guard in his center. It's all he can do, and thus he fires back. Luke is just going to keep swinging at this point. Form be damned, but he is a veritable whirlwind coming at Vader. There's not a whole lot of winning this. He's gonna try. Don't get me wrong. Vader is going to do his best, but it's just too much of an onslaught. He can't. It's like if someone comes at you and they start doing ribbon cuts at you, right? So ribbon cuts being like you're going, strike down and then you come back up and you strike down again. And you strike. If they get going enough, it can be pretty hard, pretty daunting to stop that. So naturally, Luke is going. He's able to win the crossing, expelling there. Vader does not win the crossing there. Vader has to come around. He goes up. Luke comes up. Great block. He is now. They're both strong, so they're both strong in the bind here. Luke is able to expel. Vader's now off balance. 1 and 2. He's cornering him at this point, to which Vader's exhausted at this point, and he is just hammering down, which is very poetic. 100% at that point. Keeps just beating down on him. Expels his blade. Cuts off his hand. Very, very powerful as a finish. I actually really love this fight, especially the more I age. It is very, very interesting. The height from Vader, at least from how it looks, might have Vader's head in the upper part. That's what it looked like anyway. Yeah, it's Vader's not a small man by any means either, and just the sheer tenacity, the sheer ferocity from Luke at this point. Because I would argue, like Luke has a lot of openings that people could capitalize on. This is actually a very good guard. He's pretty wide there. If Vader happened to be here, he could have gone in. He is moving forward. He is shuffling forward. Mark Hamill doing a very good performance here on this. He is shuffling forward very, very well. He is a little more controlled here, though, as you can see from about here, right? He is pretty controlled. He is controlling where Vader's blade is. He is not letting Vader's blade actually hit. And, he is a little wide, but he's still pretty centered. But it's a good fight. It is a very, very good fight. I think the choreography on this was amazing, and I think that everyone's performance here was awesome. There's a reason that years and years and years later, I still continue to watch Star Wars, and I thought I'd get my 2 cents on it as someone that grew up with the stories of, I almost said Dark Souls, stories of Star Wars, as somebody that loves the series, as somebody that, absolutely can carry on conversations about it. I thought I'd put in my 2 cents as somebody that does study combat. Am I a master at combat by any means? No. God, no, I'm not. I do study combat, and I like talking about combat, and I like engaging and sparring. SCA appropriate, obviously. But alas, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the performances in here? Do you think that this is I got things right? Do you think that I got things completely wrong? Do you have any commentary in regards to styles used here, stylistic choices? Who choreographed this, directed this? Oh, George Lucas, right? Alas, what are your thoughts? We'll see if we run into any copyright issues, because I tried to make this as small as possible. I also tried to cut out all the audio. That way, if you do want that full experience, especially with the killer soundtrack, you should definitely go watch Return of the Jedi. But alas, that'll be it from me for this time. And thank you. Thank you for coming out. I really do appreciate it. And see you in the next one. Let me know if you want more of these.